Welcome back to Release Your Inner Power podcast. I'm excited for our guest today. Her name is Laura. How are you?
Hey, Sean, I'm really good. Thanks for having me.
I know I'm excited for you to be here, so thank you so much for being here. Tell us who you are and how you got to where you are today.
It's funny so my name is Laura Maloney and I'm an educator. I'm also a wife, mom, stepmom, sister, all those good things. Dog mom, more importantly, to my little 2-year-old. We're empty nesters, so she's the only one that needs me at this moment. Um, and I think for me, when I used to start off with my story, it used to be, oh man, my life. And now that I don't know if it's age, years, wisdom, but now I really start with how grateful I am that everything has turned out uh, better than I ever thought that it could. And my career segue in hindsight brought me to where I am. And I started off in business. Then I went into education, and now I'm in educational leadership. And even starting my podcast, I think it just all was meant to land me here. And I'm pretty happy about it. My life is complicated, but that's the simple version of how I got from there to here.
I love that. I'm excited to dive into this. Tell me more about you and like the start of your adult journey. Let's dive into when you had, like you were on your path of what you were, thinking you were going to do and like how you were, what you were doing with your life and then how it got completely flipped around and what you did with that.
Well, I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was just hoping for some stability. I probably because of how my life was. I did end up moving out on my own with a roommate of mine. We both came from pretty dysfunctional families where we were just looking to be living on our own, and we were seniors in high school. So at that time, since I was an early starter for school, I was only 16 years old. And so I've lived on my own since I was a senior in high school, 16 years old. Had everybody's dream job of working in the mall, at the body shops, wearing bongo jeans.
Yeah.
And I thought I would be there forever until I was there for a few years and realized there are people working in the mall and they're like, this is it. This is it. This is all they're doing. They're working in the mall. This is how they spend all of their holidays. If anybody ever works retail, in the mall, there's no days off. It's 7 days a week. It's just retail is hard, not just in the mall. Retail is challenging. And I thought, well, I don't want to do this forever. So I went to the extreme opposite and I said, I'm going to go, I want banking hours. I didn't know what that meant, but I just knew I wanted hours that gave me holidays off and the banks were closed on Sunday. So I said, I want that. And I went and I applied everywhere and I ended up being a travel teller. So I would go to branches where tellers were on vacation and I would fill in for them. So I never really had a home base. And I loved it so much. I loved everything about banking. I was there for 10 years. I started as a travel teller. I ended up as an assistant vice president and a branch manager of our main office. I was the youngest branch manager that we had. I was just really driven and I felt like I had found my niche. But what I had really found was a community of people, and I worked for a community bank. And I used to go into our public school, and it was the town I worked in, and I worked with the economics teacher. So when they would get to the part where they would talk about checkbooks and balances and gross income, net income, then I would come in, I would partner with them, which is really weird at the time because some of those were my teachers from when I had been in high school. And I would go into my old high school and I would teach those things to the kids and throw candy at them if they got the right answers. And I thought, this is awesome. Every time I left the school, I felt like I helped somebody understand something, and it made me so happy. And I thought, I'm going to be a teacher. And I was always too scared to apply to be a teacher because it was so outside of what I was used to. I never even had anyone in my life who I knew had been a teacher. So it's not something I had been exposed to as a career. And I left the banking career. I went into taxation, and at the accounting firm, I found love. I got married, and he had said to me on our first date, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I said, oh, well, I would be a teacher. He said, That's so random. I said, I know, but I really think that that's what I should be doing. So after we got married, he said, why don't you go be a teacher? Now you have, you have consistency. And if you don't like it, you can just go back to doing whatever you were doing. And it never occurred to me that I could try something. And if I didn't like it, I could change it. That just hadn't occurred to me. And honestly, that's how I landed in education 15 years ago.
That's awesome. I like I like how you painted the picture of like in the mall, at the body shop with the jeans,
Oh man, it
all
was
the
the
pants.
best. When
Like as
those were,
soon as
you
you
can
said
tell
it, I
those
was
were my
like,
happy
yep,
memories, working in the mall, listening to the CDs and
yeah.
down the store from the record shop. Oh man, it was so much fun. It was
Oh
it
yeah.
was fun.
I know. I also worked retail for 5 years before I went into college as well. And it was like that. I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then you start doing all the hours and you're like, not so cool. Like, I
Oh
don't
yeah,
like this
when
anymore.
I was a senior in high school, I never went to one football game. I never went to any school dances. I did go to prom. I didn't have a date, but I did go to prom with a borrowed dress, because I lived on my own. I had $0 for any kind of extra thing. And every time, if I did have plans, my boss would be like, hey, what are you doing tonight? And I would say, oh, I'm going to go out with so-and-so. She's like, cancel because we're doing a remodel. And I'm like, okay, all right. Because you couldn't say no.
Right.
And I thought, and it was so fun at first. And a couple of years later, I'm like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. This is
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
It's a lot. It's a
It
lot.
is a lot.
I do really like too how you would like do experiences, like go in and be teaching with the school when you were like doing banking or like travel teller. That's like a whole thing. Like just to flip the script basically and become a teller and you're like, you're doing something that you've never done before. But then to travel is like a different level because like you said, you never have a home base. So you have to have how I see it is you have to have a little bit more skill and you have to be more to adapt to different places with different personalities, with different management, with
Mhm.
different workers, and be able to like adapt and work with that just to be because you never, like how was it like a stretch of time where you knew you would be at one bank and then move to the next one, or were you like you could be
Sometimes it could be for
here
one
one week,
day.
here one day? Okay. So it's very
Usually
temporary.
it was a week. Usually I was filling in for somebody who was on vacation. But that's another thing in hindsight, I look at how did that build me into what I am today for like my work ethic?
Yeah.
Because like when I worked at the mall, I worked in the mall before I moved out on my own. And if I was sick, my dad would say, if you're too sick to go to school, you're too sick to go to work.
Yeah.
I knew if I missed work, I would get fired. Right. And I was not going to get fired from my job in the mall because it was like, that's the thing I wanted the most in life was my job in the mall. So I never missed school because I never missed school because I didn't want to miss work. And
Mhm.
then when I was a travel teller, well, I'm already filling in for somebody. I can't call out because they're depending on me because I'm filling in for somebody. And I really think at a young age, it's what built my work ethic and it's what built my ability to be flexible. I am so flexible and nothing really jars me if I need to go work somewhere else, if I need to help somebody else, if I needed to be in a different department, even in the bank, whatever you need. I'm completely flexible, but I think it's because that's how I started. And it's just, that's how my career started. But there were some favorites that I had, and there were some that I was like, no, please don't be on vacation from that branch. And then there were other branches that I was like, yes, I'm so excited. And then there were locations that were further away that I knew I would get a good mileage check. So that was a built-in too, because I got paid for my mileage if it was outside of a certain amount. So I got these little extra benefits for what I considered being flexible and being willing to do these things. And so whatever I was doing, I would always look for, I would always say, oh, there's something extra for that. I'll do that. I'll do that. And they knew always, like, if they needed someone on Saturday who was going to get overtime, oh, Laura will do it. Laura will do it for overtime. Heck yes, Laura will do it for overtime. So
I love it.
it just, it's what grounded my career, truly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's well, it's so cool how you explain it too, because you go and you're doing these things and how much, like you said, in hindsight, like you look back and that's when you realize that that's how you've like your work ethic and just being flexible and being able to adapt to different like scenarios and things. And but just how like even when you went into the classroom and you're teaching and you're just like, oh, I want to teach, I want to try this, you know. And even though you even said it like it was really scary, but you did it anyway. Like you still did it scared, even though you were like, I don't know what I'm getting into, but I'm gonna do it because I'm gonna try. And it's cool how in that process you're like, oh wait, I can try something, and then if I don't like it, I can do
Never
something
occurred to
else.
me. It never occurred to me because I needed a paycheck. I needed a paycheck. It never occurred to me to take a chance. And I really looked at it as taking a chance because I had longevity. That was another part of work ethic. I mean, I worked in the mall for a long time. I didn't change jobs in the mall. I had one place that I worked for. That bank, I had several jobs. I worked there for 10 years. Even, you know, my school that I worked in, I probably would have been there forever had I not moved to a different county that was hours away. So I like having that consistent. I do like having that consistent, but I just am flexible within it. So it never occurred to me to take a chance and do something. And if I didn't like it, I could do something else. And I've been learning that lesson over and over and over for the last 20 years. But at the time, it did not occur to me. I didn't even realize I was good at what I was doing. It's just what felt, it was my place of comfort. And I thought, well, this is it, right? This is what I know. So this is what I'm just going to have to do forever. And I was okay with it. But when I was working with the teachers, it was just so fun. And it wasn't like it, I mean, these were teenagers. So, you know, I mean, I would get some jeering from the back. You know, it wasn't all that they were just like accommodating and rolled out the red carpet when I got there and they were bowing at me when I left, you know. But it was, I just felt like I was making a difference in somebody that would be a long-term difference for them that they may not even realize until years later, just teaching them the things that we were teaching them. And now I don't even know if they teach those. I don't even know if they teach like gross and net for paychecks. And I don't even know if people balance checkbooks anymore. I still do, but I don't know if other people do.
It's funny
I
that you
think that
say
they
that
should teach
because
some of those basics in school
I
still. And I don't
yeah.
think that they do.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I have a teenager, right? And I remember, so my mom's of the era of checkbooks, like big time. Like I feel like we are in the era of the transition from the checks, you know, to like the cards and the digital stuff. And then the teenagers now are like, I'm like, do you know how to write a check? He's like, what's a check? I'm like, oh, okay, I'm out, mom, now, you know, like, okay. So then I'm like explaining it to him on how to write it, like he's ever going to use it. But I just think that it's funny like how different it is. And I don't know if they teach that. I don't know if they have to actually select that class, you know, like, oh, I want to know these particular things. It's so important to know about your money and your budget and your finances and you know what's a good way to do it or how much things actually cost when you're done with school and you need to go be released. I call it released into the wild, right? Like you're going
I
out into the
agree.
world. That is so important because in their minds, which I love, they have all these plans and all these dreams and everything. But when you have all of that and then it's like because like things,
Reality.
yeah, it's like I don't want that to, like for him, especially my kiddo, like I don't want all that to be just like squashed down to nothing because he had like this huge picture and instead of working with it while he's in school and being like, how can I get to this, you know, dream of what I want to do versus I'm gonna do this. And then you're like, no, you're not. You're like,
Well, it's the world of
too expensive,
social
too much
media. So
money.
they don't see how the hard work that goes into the things. They just see the highlight reels. And I'm constantly reminding kids of highlight reels, highlight reels. You think people are putting on Facebook when they have, you know, a bad day or a bad whatever, their car breaks down. Like, yes, they post a nail in their tire, but there's true grief and loss and hard times that people go through. They don't highlight them. They don't highlight them in their Facebook reels. So you know, you can't compare yourself to what other people have and do. And just because there's so many influencers and just because some, you know, video goes viral, it doesn't necessarily mean it's like determining that you're going to play the lotto every day and your plan is that that's retirement. I used to have people that they would say that is their plan for retirement. And I would say, I am scared. I am scared.
I am scared. Yes. That's so true. It is so true. It's like the whole instant, like if I just do this and this is going to happen.
Right.
No.
No, it's
Bring it to
no.
you. But no.
I mean, there's manifestation and then there's like the dream world. I feel like there's, a happy medium in there of, I'm all about manifestation and having a dream and having a vision and having goals. But, I'm not about watching The Secret every day for 30 days and hoping for the best. I'm about, I have a dream and I have a goal, and I also have the ability to work towards it. And
Mhm.
that's where the magic is the working towards it.
Taking the steps. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I love that. I definitely agree with that. So with all of this adapting and all of the things with your work ethic and on all of this, I'm really curious because I know that we've chatted before, so I obviously know a lot more than the listeners do, but I want to dive into you becoming a mom and your story of how kind of unexpectedly that happened with you and how you worked through that. I think that some of these things that you learned with through your work also probably helped you with your story of becoming a mom.
Probably. And the fact that it was family, so I couldn't, I had no, there was no choice, there was no choosing. But a parent in the most non-traditional way is that I inherited my brother. And we joke that most people inherit like money and cars and, things that are amazing. And I inherited my 15-year-old brother when I was 25. But the truth is, we did have such a unique, I don't think it's unique now that I'm listening to so many podcasts and I'm hearing of all this trauma that people are sharing. I don't know if it was unique, but it was definitely not Brady Bunch style for growing up. We didn't have, we had just a different childhood, and it wasn't always where we knew what was going to happen next or where we were going to be or where we were going to stay. Or I think our parents, now in my maturity, I know that they did the best that they could do with what they had. But in the time, it was just looking back, I think, if man, if we survived our childhood, we got it made. We can do this adult thing.
Hmm.
And so I was the mini mom because I was the oldest daughter. So I was the mini mom growing up when our parents weren't there, when, you know, things needed to happen and dinner needed to be made. It was me. So I didn't just inherit him at 15. I really had already been the mini mom, the whole time I was growing up. And my brother is 10 years younger than I am. So he my dad got sick and he ended up diagnosed at 49 with lung cancer, and we think it's because he used to build houses with my grandpa. He never smoked. It wasn't the type that you get from smoking, and he didn't even have health insurance. So this is a small business owner who had done a lot for the community, and thankfully he had clients that he knew through his community service from his small business who helped him through his cancer treatments. But he only was diagnosed to passing away 7 months.
Oh, wow.
And so my mom was still alive, but they lived in a different state. And so they had come down. I remember messaging her and saying, listen, this is like beyond my brain. I can only be mini mom. I'm on my own and I'm trying to make things work here. I'm not sure what to do. I need you to be here. I know you're divorced and all that other stuff, but I need you to be here because I'm not sure what we need to do. And we're having to make decisions that I don't know how to make these decisions. And so she's like, okay, okay, okay. So she brings my little brother down. Well, at this point, he's a teenager and he's rebellious. He's the youngest. So there's lots of connotations to him being the youngest, and they're probably mostly true, just like it's mostly true about me being one of the middle children, all the things that we say go along with that. And so she brings him down, and he ends up getting in a little bit of trouble while he's there. Well, now he has like court mandated things that he has to do. And my mom's like, I have to go back to my state. And I'm like, what, wait, you can't, what do you mean? He has to stay here for these things and you have to leave. I don't understand what that means. And she was like, well, your dad said that when he gets better, he'll take him, your brother, and he can live with him because that's just how it has to be because I don't even know what to do with him anymore. He's just unruly. I said, okay. And our dad kept saying he was getting better, and it didn't make sense. And in hindsight, we understand, but he wasn't getting better. He was getting worse, but he didn't know how to tell us. So the easiest thing for him to just tell us was that he was getting better. So we all think he's getting better. My mom goes back. My brother's living with me. I'm waiting for dad to get better so that I can move my little brother to his house. And my dad passes away. And here I am. And so I'm like, okay, well, we do this. That's great. And, he's my little brother. but he was bigger than me. I mean, he was like a football player, linebacker, 15-year-old. I could tell him to do whatever I wanted to tell him, but truly, I was his sister, not his mother. And so he wasn't, we didn't have the relationship of we cleaned the house together on Saturday morning. No, we came from a dysfunctional family and the dysfunction was in all of us. And so it was the biggest learning curve of my whole life, I am sure. And, it was tough love, and it was both of us overcoming. We both made it. I'm super proud of him. He's actually retired special forces now, and he's made such a contribution to the world and turned into be such a good kid. But he gave me a run for my money, and we're both redheads. We're both strong-willed. And so when he got finished with all of his things, at that point I said, okay, you can move back in with mom. And he said, I'm not moving back in with her. I'm staying here with you. And I said, so this is how this part of my life is going to be. And, that's great. That's fine. We're flexible. And I said, okay, but, you have to help me. I can't, like, I know you think I know what I'm doing because I'm older, but I don't know. Like, I had to figure out getting him health insurance through the state of Florida. I had to figure out, Social Security from my dad. When he passed away, I had to figure out all these things. I didn't have kids of my own. I didn't have a significant other. It was just me trying to figure out, and then he would, he would skip school. I would drop him off and I would go to work, and then I would come home for something and he would be there with his friends playing video games. So, he gave me a run for my money, but we lived through it and we both were successful despite the situation that we went through, and it ended up being good. I mean, he had, I know my world wasn't ideal, but he lost his mom, his grandma, and his best friend in a car accident. His grandma died of cancer, dad died of cancer, best friend died in a car accident, all within a 3-month period of time. So at least I'm an adult, and I was having a hard time processing, but I knew he was watching me. So I had to process very maturely and couldn't throw fits and cry randomly. Like, I'm trying to hold it together. But he just had such a traumatic teenage years. The fact that he can reflect now and be grateful for what we have, and he turned into a person who makes really good decisions for himself and others. It's remarkable.
So I have a couple things. So
it's a lot to take in.
It's okay. It's okay. I have a couple things. So when you said, I really like when you said, I'm not the mom, I'm the sister. And so the dynamic was like different, because it's so true. It's so true. Like, you're trying to come in and be like this mom, like, I now all of a sudden I'm going to be telling you what to do, when the normal dynamic is usually teenagers or brother sister is like, okay, we're going to do this and don't tell mom. And like, you're kind of like teaming up against the parents basically.
Right.
And then now you're in this role of like mom sister.
And I had been the cool sister. I had been the one in on the shenanigans. And now I'm like, you have to do this, and you have to go to bed, and you have to go to school. And yeah, I went from the fun sister to the not fun sister very fast.
I'm sure you had moments where you're just like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what do I even know what I'm doing? How am I doing this? Like, you probably had freak out moments like, oh my gosh, like this is so much pressure while you're grieving, I might add. And then you're trying to just like,
and I'm trying to work.
Successful human.
Like, I was a professional.
Yeah.
I was a professional at the bank, and I'm trying to work. And it was I remember he was a drastic person. He was like, the only way to get his attention was being drastic. I remember one time he didn't come home, and I remember thinking, like, I didn't even sleep. And I'm thinking, gosh, is this what my parents went through? Like, when I would sneak out at night, I used to think, gosh, what's the big deal when I would come home? And now I'm awake all night just thinking, is this what my parents felt? No wonder they were so mad at me in the morning. They hadn't slept all night. Yeah. So I'm thinking the same thing. And so he calls me like 3 o'clock in the morning to tell me that he's not coming home. I'm like, you don't call at 3 o'clock in the morning to tell someone you're not coming home. You come home when you're supposed to, or you call at a normal hour and you say what your arrangements are, and you let me know where you're at. You can't just be out gallivanting, right? Of course, the non-fun sister. And I remember I said that I tried to sit him down, and I tried to have a civil conversation with him about it. And he acted like he knew. He said yes. He shook his head. And then about a week later, he did it again. I was like, oh, no. I remember I changed the lock. I deadbolted he didn't have this one key to the one door that we had. And I deadbolted the lock he did have, and I took his things and I put his clothes in a garbage bag and put it in the front yard. And the next day I went to work. So he calls me the next day in a panic that he's locked out. I said, "Oh, no, that's intentional. Your stuff's in the front yard. Obviously, you don't need to be at my house. You have somewhere else to be. So you just go there." And he said, "No, I need to be at that house." I said, "No, you don't, because if you were, you would have come home last night, and I'm not playing these games with you. I'm trying to support us. I'm trying to survive. And if you're not going to help me, then you just need to figure it out. You're grown, right? You're grown. You didn't need to come home. You figure it out." He never did that again. Of course, when I came home, because, like, I don't want anybody thinking that there was child abuse. There was not child abuse.
Right.
But honestly, it was just a free for all, because that's how he had been with my mother, which is now I know why she was saying, "No, he's uncontrollable. He's not coming home with us because he's just going to do more of the same." I learned what more of the same meant. But again, the sister, I mean, who am I to tell him what to do? And he's, 1.5 feet taller than I am, and, 100 pounds heavier. What am I can't make him do anything. I
Mhm.
can't make him.
Yeah, you almost had to like up level
I had to up level so many times.
and like do things that you're like, do I really have to do this? And you're like, I have to do this. I have to do this, or it's not,
Yeah. Yes.
you know?
Because I had to show him how he was impacting me by being just as drastic as how he was being. But in his mind, he didn't realize that, because he was just used to just being a free for all. He would do whatever he wanted to at where he had lived with my mom, and he just didn't understand boundaries and rules. Had no concept. It's funny that now, of course, he's retired from the military, but at the time when he lived with me, there were no understanding of boundaries or rules whatsoever. And then again, in hindsight, again, I'm a stepmom, and I have been a stepmom for the 20 years I've been married, and I think it helped me know my boundaries. And I am not the type of person to say, "Do this because I said so." And I have a clear understanding. I love my stepchild. I know there's a negative connotation saying stepchild. Don't say stepchild. I do consider him my child. I consider him the only child I have, because he is it. But he does have a mom, and he has a mom and a dad, and they love him very much. And I'm not his mom, but I am another person of support for him. And I am proud to be his stepmom. And I think it helped my husband and I's relationship, because I never threw out anything weird about choosing, between him and me and his decisions based on raising his kids. Like, I knew my role, just like I knew my role with my brother. And I give the benefit of the doubt, and I'm respectful, and I try to have common sense and try to beg people to have common sense when they are mad and having conversations. But I think it did, set me up for being a good stepmom, in the fact that it's not my house, my rules. It's our house, it's our rules. And I can have conversations, and I can know my role, and I can love you just as much as anyone could love someone that they didn't give birth to. And I can still and respect that you have a mother. You know what I mean? So I think that did help set me up for that, because otherwise I really don't know how I would have been as a stepmom. It's the only way that I knew was raising my brother. And I wasn't truly his mom from birth either. So it did help me with my stepson, but I'm glad my stepson was never like my brother. So
Easier. It was
thankfully,
easier.
but I do
Or
believe in karma, and my brother was my karma. So I never needed to have children of my own. I was really good. And now I'm in education, I have several thousand who depend on me. So I'm good.
you're like, I got all the children around that I can
Yeah,
help.
I'm good.
I also think that, there's something to be said about when you said that your brother, you know, is like how successful and how different he is now. I feel like the way that you guided him, even though the dynamic was off, was giving him some kind of a light, or some kind of like planting the seeds of how it can be possible, because he went from one scenario to the next, but it was like all new learning. And then just with the dynamic of not being a mom and being a sister, regardless of the role that you had to play, I feel like he still looked up to you because you were the older sister. And so he would question, like, how teenagers are like with moms, are like my mom doesn't know. But when it's a sister, it's different. Like
Yes,
it's
I can
it's
see that.
different. So it's almost like he doesn't want to listen to you because you're the sister, but then he's probably like, oh, she probably knows, like there's more consideration, I think, to the thought instead of just pushing it off because you're the mom. And so I feel like you kind of had an in without feeling like you had any in, right? You probably felt like it was harder, but I feel like you kind of had an in because it would at least have him hesitate enough to like slow down and stop and think about it. Where maybe in the moment in the beginning, it was like, is any of this working? Am I doing the right thing? Am I messing him up? But then like, look at it now. Like, yes, it was all like,
one of the things that he tells me for his, for what he got from our relationship and living together. And I wouldn't say I raised him because he, there's a lot of people that raised him throughout his years, but is that I was consistent and I didn't know what modeling meant then. Like there's a lot of things that we do that we don't know what it's called until later. And we realize, oh my gosh, look what I was doing for so many years. But I was really consistent with modeling because I'm a consistent person. Like I'm a hard worker. I'm going to go to work every day. Even if it's hard, I'm still going to go to work. He saw that. He saw that when I was falling apart, I would pull it together and do what I had to do. He saw that when I only had $5 left, I would make it count. He saw that, I wasn't, I would work really hard if I wanted something extra. So I wouldn't say no, but I wouldn't just make it rain. You know what I mean? Like I had boundaries and I modeled that and I was consistent. And I think that's the same thing with my stepson too. We, as a couple, we were always consistent. We always cared about what he needed or what he wanted. And we had conversations. I think one of the things that made our relationship easier with my brother to make us stop butting heads so much is when I started sharing with him. He was 15. He didn't know what it meant for me to work to pay bills. So for him to turn the AC down and me to get a $500 electric bill when I was used to paying $100, that didn't mean anything to him. And it's not bad on him. He didn't know, he didn't understand. So when I started sharing with him, listen, this is how much I get paid. This is how much our bills are. We have to eat with the rest of it. Like this, just like he thought I was an adult, so I had money because that's where money comes from. Adults. Well, no, we get our money from whoever's paying us. And so not that parents want to bring their kids into all of their personal information, but I think it's what helped us because he started to understand what he could do to help with those things because they were real. But in his mind before, all those things were just taken care of. So he didn't even have a concept of what it meant.
Yeah, I have I have a friend that years ago he did this. He went and cashed his like whole check into cash, and then he sat his kids down at the table and he's like, "Okay," because that was also his thing. He was like, "They're acting like I'm just made of money, like it's just gonna kill, like I'm the ATM and whatever." And he sat them down at the table and he was like, "Okay." And so he's like, "This," and he would like take this is so we can live in this house. This is so we can have water coming out of the faucet. This is so, like, and he separated it out to be like, this is how much we have, for food, which leaves us this for fun or what have you. You know what I mean? Like separate it all out,
Right.
big little stacks. And then it was like, whoa. You know what I mean? Just because they could see it. This is every month. And sometimes these stacks change depending on if you go and touch the, temp gauge, or
Or
you
the
leave
car
the
breaks
faucet
down.
on, or yeah,
Right.
turn the hose on in the summer. No, I forgot to turn it off. This stack gets higher. So it's such a thing to give them concept around, and like you said, you don't have to go into like super detail about it, but just giving them some kind of a concept of what it is, how it can like kind of wake them up, like, oh yeah, the things that I am doing are affected, like it's all moving, with the
It
money.
will make them a stronger adult.
Totally. So they can understand how it all works. And just having those conversations, and his way was like visual because his kids were like, he had been telling him, and they weren't getting it. He's like, whatever, this is what we're doing. It's just, this is how it works, and was showing them all the stacks, and then it clicked. They were like, oh, okay, now
Exactly.
I understand it. So I love that. And I find that it's kind of cool, the correlation too, like with your brother and teaching him that, and then how you went to class and you were like teaching other people about, you know, gross income, net income, their finances, checks, and all that stuff too, and how that kind of like was that around the same time?
Yeah, it was actually. It
That's
was actually. It was around the same time.
that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool how it was like two different aspects, but then they're like,
Oh yeah, joined together. And it's funny because now even today, you know, I don't know, 25 years, 25 plus years later, whenever we have a special occasion, my brother and I will always look for Martinelli's, what is that? It's
the apple cider
the
stuff.
apple cider,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that sparkling apple cider,
yeah,
because we used to sell it at the dollar store for $1. And that was our like special drink because
yeah.
that was all we could afford. That was like our champagne. And so we would have pancakes and Martinelli's sparkling apple cider for holidays. And that would be our, champagne and our way to toast and celebrate. And so all these years later, we still joke that we love Martinelli's sparkling apple cider, and it's super inexpensive,
That's
but that's
really
our
cool.
favorite.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. I love that. I love that you guys still do that and celebrate with that. That's pretty cool. So I want to ask you some questions about like what did you do in your career path and then with raising your brother. I know looking back now, like we said, looking back now, sometimes you do things and you don't understand why you're even doing them until later and you're like, oh, okay. What kind of things did you do for like yourself so you could show up for him and so you could keep going on this career path of changing into education, um to kind of like fill yourself up and fuel yourself so you could do that?
I didn't. What comes to mind when you ask me that question is I thought I was bringing my little brother to counseling. And of course, he wouldn't stay in there. So he walked off. And the counselor said to me, he drew a picture and he's like, family, work, play. And he showed it to me. And he said, do you know what this is? And I said, no, but I'm, like, my brother's the one that needs to listen to this. He needs to come in. He's like, no, I think you need to listen to this because your play over here is struggling. I'm like, who has time to play? I mean, I'm trying to make ends meet. I'm trying to work 13 different jobs. I'm trying to, raise this kid so that, he doesn't end up in prison. I don't have time for fun and play. And so I don't really know. I always say, do what I say, not what I do, even to my current people I work with, when I'm trying to explain life work balance. But I can honestly say that over the last couple of years, especially starting the podcast was so much fun, but I started playing. I realized the more I played, the easier my life got. And I don't know how to explain what that means or what that feels like, but if you're just going 200 miles an hour for 24/7, 365, eventually, I learned if I didn't take the time, something would shut down on my body and I would be forced to take the time. In the middle of the pandemic, I ended up with ocular shingles and I work online. I couldn't see. I had headaches. I had shingles on my face, like the most inopportune area to have anything because people look at your face. And I thought, wow, that's really beautiful and nice. What a great opportunity for me to be dealing with this right now. But it was the perfect opportunity. And it was exactly what I needed to realize that I needed to have fun. And if I didn't carve out that time, I always think about that paper that gentleman wrote for me. And that was 20 years prior to that. I still just didn't have work-life balance. And I just lived, eating. Since I love what I do so much, I don't consider it work, but you know what? It is work. And if you're just giving, 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 something's going to give on you and it's not going to be good. So I do have a better work-life balance now. I really do disconnect when I'm off. I have fun. We live in the Keys. I live where people vacation. And still some days will go by that I think, man, did I even go outside today? I just was in back-to-back meetings from night until night. But when I'm disconnecting, I am disconnecting. And we have a camper and we go to beautiful places in Florida and the Carolinas, and I just have more fun. I really do look for fun now, whereas it never even occurred to me as like, it was never even in my peripheral vision. And now I look for opportunities and ways to have fun.
I love that. I love how you said that even now, like 20 years later, that picture that he drew for you was a total, like he totally planted a seed right for you, right? But
Mhm.
you were not in a space to be able to see it. But then, like you said, years later, you're like, what? And it went
Yeah.
right back to that picture, and you're like, this he's talking about,
I
you know?
know. And I think, why did I listen to him? But I mean, that was truly my gift that day, was that my brother walked out so I could have that conversation with that man. And it took me so long to realize it. It took me decades to realize it.
But I think, but it's such a cool thing because you went instantly to that. You went instantly to that moment as soon as you were in a mode to like do things for you and your brother, and you like needed to, so
Survival.
it's oh yeah, you weren't, I don't want to say you weren't ready because I feel like you were ready, but you just didn't fully hear or see it, right? But I love how when you did have the realization, you went straight back to that moment and you're like, this is what he was talking about. But I love also that you said like now you look for it because of what you know now of what you get out of it because of how
Well, I
you
used to think of working was not fun. Like working was something you had to do to make money, and then fun was something that wouldn't compensate you. And I didn't have time to do the things that wouldn't compensate me. But that's my own shift with money, right? I mean, that's what I've been working on for most of my adulthood is you don't have to work hard for money. You can just do your job and still have fun. You don't have to the word hustle, I have a love-hate relationship with the word hustle, but you don't have to hustle to the point of no return and no fun for you in order to make ends meet. You don't have to. You can find balance, and it does help that I love doing what I'm doing, so I don't feel like I'm working, but it does. And also it helps that I have a boss that will say things like, if you don't take vacation, I'm putting it on your evaluation, because you need a model vacation that is okay, and you're not modeling that. And it's really true. It is really
yeah.
true.
So that's funny. That's funny. We also have that system in the hospital. If you don't take vacation by a certain time, they make you take it. It's like mandatory. So it's interesting that your boss is like, excuse me, you need to take your vacation.
Yeah, she's like, the people who look up to you, they see that you are a workaholic, and that's not healthy. And I'm like, well, I didn't think about it like that.
Well, but I
So
love that you love your job so much too, that it doesn't feel like, oh, when can I take my next vacation? I think that that's awesome because then that also fills you up, but it's just a different way. And like you said, when you disconnect, you make sure that you truly disconnect because of that. Because like you said, it's work and you still need to take a break from that, even if you do love it, you know?
I saw something somewhere a long time ago. I don't think it was like before Instagram and TikTok and all of those. And it said something about I don't even remember who said it. So if I'm not giving credit to somebody, please, I'm not doing it unintentionally. But it said something about building the life so you don't need to look forward to a vacation. And in my mind, oh my gosh, that was such an aha moment for me at the very moment that I either read or heard that, because I thought, is that possible? Is it actually possible to have a life where I'm not counting down to my next vacation? And it truly is. That's what I've been doing for years. And I have a life that I don't look forward to a vacation, because my life is good every single day, not just good on vacation days. It's so good. But it's been an intentional journey to make it that way.
That's so good. I love that though. I love that. That's so awesome. That's like what everybody is like dreams of having. So it's so awesome that you have that. Well, I want to back up a little bit. You mentioned your podcast, and I want to make sure that we chat about it because I love the space that you've created with that. Tell me more about your podcast.
My podcast is called Happy Thrive Vibes, and I launched it in October, November of 2023. I don't know. I talked about it for so long that I don't even remember the actual launch, but it was either October or November. And it was really, I had that domain and that title and everything for like 4 or 5 years. And I had a blog, and it was just about really, I survived for so long. I wanted to not just survive. And I felt like the coming out of the pandemic was the same thing for so many people. So many people survived. And I felt like we were all well aware of what that felt like. And that now we had a right to thrive. We don't have to feel like we have to beat ourselves down in order to feel good. I mean, everyone deserves to have fun, and everyone deserves to be happy. And I think there's ways to find happiness in all the things that we went through. I never let it control me. Sometimes I went down the rabbit hole of just depression and despair. I mean, I think that's normal for the situations that I went through. But in the end, I just always thought but there has to be more. There has to be better somewhere, some way. This can't last forever. And I just kept looking for it, but I didn't look for it as in like a thought bubble, like, oh, I hope it gets better later. I looked for the good. I looked for the good in people. I looked for the good in opportunities, and I look for the good in situations. And I just try to live there where there are opportunities. And I am so grateful for everything that I have, for relationships that I have. I don't mean just things, I mean relationships and my health and my family. And I just wanted to spread that, like coming from a place of looking for opportunities to have fun and looking for playful moments and looking to do the things that you love and more of it, and being so grateful for what you have, even if it's not exactly what you want. Someone else is begging for the thing that you have that you don't even care about. And
Mhm.
I remind myself of that, and I'm grateful for it. I have a gratitude journal, and I just try to stay there. I try to stay in gratitude. I try to stay in and that for me is thriving,
Mhm.
because I'm not just counting my dollars to make my, utility bill. The fact that everything can just be on auto pay, and I know with one of my paychecks I can pay that, what a blessing that is. It never would have occurred to me before that, we didn't have all these credit cards and stuff. I'm like, I only have 5 cents in my checking account.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not lost on me. I'm really grateful for where I'm at. And I want to share that it's so easy to listen to podcasts with people who own businesses and companies and millionaires, and oh, they're living their best life. But you know what? Regular people are living their best life too. And I like interviewing them to have them share with others how they're living their best life and what intentions are they setting for themselves to be able to live their best life, so that someone listening can just maybe be inspired to know that they can have a joy-filled life, and that if they like doing something, carve out the time, do more of what you love. Because when you do more of what you love, whether it be scrapbooking or reading or daydreaming or drawing, that's your gift. The thing that you don't have to think about, but the thing that you lose time doing because you love it so much, that's your gift. And you may have to do the things that you have to do to pay your bills and to have a career and to set an example and have a household, but you can still do the things that you love, and it brings you joy. And when you carry around that joy and that gratitude, then you're going to tell people, oh my gosh, I love your nail polish. Oh, I love your outfit. Oh, that's a great color for you. Or just on the phone with a representative, thank you so much for your patience. I really appreciate you helping me, because they're probably getting told off by 3 other people. But when you yourself are grounded and grateful, it spreads.
Mhm.
So that's what my podcast is about.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to have the link and everything so you guys can find this podcast. In case you want to have a listen, I suggest you do it. It's going to be great. It will be in the show notes, okay? I'm so glad that we've had this conversation. You have dropped some really cool gems, and thank you so much for sharing your story. I do have one more question that I like to ask everyone that comes on is, would you share what your superpower is with us today?
My superpower. I probably used to would have said, I'm alive, aren't I? I don't know how I live, but I am. I think, but now, here and now, I have, I think it's optimism, because I don't, I'm not fake optimism. I'm not, oh, I'm sure it happened for a reason, because that's what my mom taught me to say. I'm true optimism. I believe people are inherently good. I believe things will work out. And I believe everyone is doing the best with what they can in any given situation. So I think for me, my superpower is optimism. It annoys my husband sometimes, but we'll be in a car and there's an accident and we're stuck there for 3 hours, and I'll say, well, at least we weren't in the accident. And he's like, seriously? But I mean, it's true. I mean, it's
Yeah.
true. We
Yeah.
weren't in the accident. It could have been worse. Like, I'd rather sit in traffic than sit in an accident.
Mhm.
But I am optimistic, and I do inherently believe the good of people and situations.
That's so good. That's such a good one. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing everything and your story and your superpower. I was so happy to have you on today. It was a great conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. So exciting.